Washington is yet to pick up their first commit in the transfer portal. Is there any cause for concern?
You are Locked On Huskies, your daily podcast on the Washington Huskies. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back into the Locked On Huskies podcast. I'm Tomashoff. That's Lars Hanson. We have for Inside the Huskies of Fan Nation Sports Illustrated. You can check out all our written work over there at si.com/college/Washington. Thank you for making this your first watch or first listen of the day. Today's episode is brought to you by LinkedIn. These days, every new potential hire can feel like a high-stakes wager for your small business. That's why LinkedIn Jobs help find the right people for your team faster and for free. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/LockedOnCollege. Terms and conditions apply. All right, Lars, we are sitting here as we record this on Monday afternoon. And I know as we just, wrapped up our pre-show talk that I'm going to jinx this by us having this discussion and putting this out on Tuesday morning. But Washington has yet to receive a commit from anybody in the transfer portal. And there haven't been a lot of visits that have actually taken place yet either. Is there any cause for concern? Because I think the answer is yes and no.
Yeah, that's kind of where I'm at, because if you look at it, I mean, I think there would be more of a cause for concern if the recruiting class was also not basically shored up aside from one or two guys, right? One of which we'll talk about. One of which we'll talk about for sure later, but one we've already hit on with Aaron Butler. So it's not. I think that would be more of a concern, right? If you still had some holes to fill in the class, and you're also not trying to figure out, okay, do we go portal for that position, or do we do this? Everything they're doing in the portal is designed around either guys that they know are going to transfer out after the fact, or replacing guys that they know are graduating. And one commit or one recruit that's visiting today from the Notre Dame tight end. You already know two guys are leaving the position, right? So now you already know who you're replacing there. So I think there's some other positions where it's like, hey, let's see how this plays out. Let's see maybe if we can find somebody maybe not cheaper in the portal, but, for lack of a better term, that's maybe undervalued a little bit more. And they clearly, they know positions that they want to target, right? I mean, defensive line, linebacker, but and Right. And you would think like, okay, well, this would be a perfect opportunity to get some guys visiting when you're practicing for the portal. I mean, that's when they got Dylan Johnson last year. Dylan Johnson came up from Mississippi State during the bowl practices and then committed, I believe, after the bowl game. No,
early January. Yeah.
Early January. Right. Somewhere around there. Right. So, but he had come up in a perfect time, right? When you're getting guys, because I believe the dead period is January 4th, 5th.
I think you're right. Yeah, so somewhere in that area.
First week of January. So by the time the team makes its signing class next Wednesday, I want to say on the 20th, then there might be a little more cause for concern if they don't have anybody at those certain positions, right? Because then you're strictly just basing it off what you have from the high school class. So I think it's a mixed bag of yes and no. Yes, there's a little cause for concern because how are you losing potential guys to Florida who went 6-6, 7-5 under Billy Napier? USC gets Nate Clifton, right? Clifford.
Yep.
The Vanderbilt defensive line transfer and Washington beat USC, right? But then you look at USC's defensive coordinator hire. You look at some other things, and okay, I can kind of see why certain players would go there and whatnot. But if you're Washington and you're playing for a college football playoff, how are you not able to get some of these guys on campus? I think is the not concern, but maybe reason to pause.
You're right. So that's where the yes comes in for me, where there's cause for concern that some of these guys aren't getting to campus. Like a couple of guys we can point to. We talk about William Lee, the Kansas State transfer who committed Texas A&M before taking his other couple of visits. I'm not necessarily surprised by that one in terms of Texas A&M's normal recruiting strategy. Let's just, call a spade there. So I can't say I'm too surprised by that one, but let's talk about some other ones, right? Like Nate Clifton, who had a pre-existing relationship with defensive line coach Nokia Brechterfield and doesn't even get to campus and goes to, yeah, you're right. USC's got a couple of really nice hires on defense that it's, this is really exciting, but not, even making the trip to Washington before doing that. Talk about Joey Slackman, who it looks like Florida is probably the favorite right now. And we'll see if he ends up taking any other visits, but not getting on campus. That's a problem. Where the guys at positions of need, those are the ones that are not coming to campus. Where, getting an offensive tackle is going to be great. Getting another tight end would be really nice for this offense. Getting another quarterback would be almost a luxury at a certain point, where we kind of look at, you and I were talking about Austin Mack before the show started, where when those are still needs, and those are still needs for this team, but they're not nearly as glaring as when we look at linebacker, when we look at another corner, when you look at defensive tackle. Those are glaring needs. And the fact that those are the guys that are committing before even stepping on campus can be seen as a little bit of an issue. But it also cannot be seen as an issue when we look at, somebody who hasn't committed yet that we talked about is Alabama redshirt freshman Isaiah Hastings, who's in the portal. I know you and I both we both really like his upside. That's really promising. They offered a defensive tackle from West Virginia yesterday, who I kind of like what he might be able to bring to the program, where there's still bodies that are out there, but it's the fact that they're not closing on some of their top targets for that even would just be here for a season. And there's a point where you want to say, you can trust this coaching staff because, hey, they got you to a college football playoff. That's great. But now it's about sustaining that success and finding a way to do that.
Right. And I mean, I think the other thing is that this isn't necessarily the issue with Mckee Jr, but maybe with the cornerback position, maybe if you're making a coaching change, it's kind of hard to get guys on campus, not if they don't know who they're going to play for, which is why it's always a dicey role to bring a coach back on a 1-year contract, right? Whether Juice Brown comes back and gets an extension or not, bringing a coach in on a 1-year contract is almost a death sentence. And now when you're at cornerback and you're an assistant coach, okay, it's not like bringing like a head coach back, right? Like if DeBoer was on a 1-year contract, right? That's a different story. That'll never be the case. But having that as a potential reason, that's an easy out for kids to say, well, hey, I like you guys, but I don't know if I can visit if you guys are gonna, make a couple of changes after your bowl games. So it's a little harder to pinpoint for certain guys, hey, who's coming back, who's not. And that's not to say Juice Brown won't come back. Maybe he does. But knowing that he's on a 1-year contract.
It feels like the whole staff is trending towards returning at this point.
Right, exactly. And so, but if you're making one change, maybe that's why, because the thing with Slackman that he told me he loves Mckee Jr, right? Mckee Jr came all the way out to Philadelphia to meet with him. So that's a significant trip for Mckee. Now it's just a matter of, okay, well, maybe he's saving the Washington visit for last, right? Can Washington survive the Florida and Wisconsin visits, right? So far they have, but since he still has not set an official visit to Washington, it's kind of hard to say yes, that's still even a possibility. So there's a lot of it's really intriguing though why they can't close on these guys, because you would think a team in the college football playoff would be able to close or at least be a little more attractive to an again. A&M is a different level of attraction, right? It's both the SEC and it's the recruiting strategy, as you mentioned. So there's a little bit of difference there, and Washington probably won't ever be Texas A&M from that regard, right? Where you could have a great NIL setup, but I don't think Texas A&M just operates on a different level. So you can still win and make the college football playoff the way Washington has. It just makes things a little harder to see to the end when you're struggling in those middle portions, a la Arizona State, a la Stanford, so same thing with the season where it's like, wow, these guys are winning, but man, it's not pretty, where it's like, hey, the staff is recruiting and they're doing good. Yeah, but they're not getting guys. And so it's like, how good are they actually doing? And it's not a shot at the staff, right? Because we know they're working hard, right? We know the offers are going out. So that it would also be more of a cause for concern if they weren't continuing to offer guys, right? If they were just trying to go after Joey and Clifton and Nate Clifton and that's it, right? Like trying for like the one-offs and not going after a Hastings, not going after a Lockhart, not going after a number of guys where it's like, hey, I understand you guys don't want to throw out a ton of offers, but like this is almost Chris Peterson level here.
Yep. No, I like that point a lot, because then on the side of no, it's that point exactly. It's the offers are still going out, and also this high school class is good. Like it's not a bad class. And I know we'll talk probably a little bit more about Dominic Kirks, who, we'll kind of see what happens with him, where he might end up going to USC. But it's there's still a lot to work out, and getting some of these instant impact guys in the door should be a little bit easier than it is right now. All right, Lars, we're going to end up switching gears here because in good news, 4-star Paul Mencke, the safety from Texas, has set an official visit to come up here pretty soon, and we're going to talk about that a lot more. But first, we're going to send a message to our good friends over at LinkedIn. When you're hiring for your small business, you want to have as many top-tier candidates as possible to interview. That's why you should check out LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs has the tools to help find the right professionals for your team faster and for free. LinkedIn isn't just another job board. LinkedIn has a vast network of more than 1 billion professionals, which makes it the best place to hire. Hiring is so easy when you have that many quality candidates. In fact, that 86% of small businesses get a qualified candidate within 24 hours. LinkedIn knows that small businesses are wearing so many hats and might not have the time or resources to hire. And thankfully with LinkedIn, the process is intuitive, quick, and easy. They even just launched a feature that helps you write job descriptions, making the process even easier and quicker. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockdowncollege. That's linkedin.com/lockdowncollege. Post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. All right, Lars. So we've talked a lot about 4-star safety Paul Mencke Jr., who's a Duke commit right now and he lives down in Texas from the state of Washington. His dad played at Washington State. And so he has set an official visit. I know this is something that you've been working on over on Inside the Huskies. So I'm just going to hand it off to you and you can give us a little bit more background and we can get into what this might mean for the safety position going forward.
Yeah, so UW co-defensive coordinator, safeties coach, Chuck Morrell did an in-home visit last week with Paul Mencke Jr. down in Texas, and at that point, he set an official visit to Washington for December 15th through the 17th, which is a very key timely visit because that's 3 days before the early signing day. I asked Mencke if he's heard from any other coaches. He didn't really say. He basically said it's just Washington and kind of Duke at this point, which is a little surprising that Elko isn't showing any interest from Texas A&M side of things. Maybe he is, and Mencke's playing it down. But he did say that he does want to still sign in December, which, okay, if you're making that visit, either you're visiting Texas A&M this week or something in those regards, or you're looking at just Duke and Washington. And there is rationale behind why he could stay at Duke, right? Especially with Manny Diaz being the defensive coordinator, maybe he's able to strike up a relationship there. But I think with the way Washington has kind of handled his recruitment, and they really liked him when he came out initially before he committed to Duke. But the problem was they never got him on campus, right? So he had made multiple trips to Notre Dame, multiple trips to Duke. There was a couple other visits that he had scheduled in there. I believe he also had a visit scheduled to Stanford, but that never came to fruition either because he committed to Duke. So getting now into the other point that we've talked about, now that Vince Dunley has already entered the portal, that scholarship spot has opened up, right? So just that's a direct 1-for-1 replacement right there. We haven't seen many safety offers go out to portal guys. At least I don't think I've seen any.
I haven't seen that either, yeah.
So that to me has kind of always seemed like UW was lining up Mencke to take Nunley's spot. They just didn't want to make it look like they forced Vince out. Hence why they took Mencke on an unofficial visit for the Apple Cup. He's now coming back up with, I believe, his aunt and a couple other family members for the official visit, which basically is that's the family that he's going to be, the family you're rolling with. Like all the people that are going to be able to come up will be up on that visit. And I think if Washington can close on that would be another significant addition out of Texas. You get some good safety depth. That doesn't limit you in the portal because you can still go get guys between. I don't know what the deadline is, but I believe there's still an opportunity for portal additions later on in 2024 in the spring. But getting Paul would be a massive addition because another safety out of Texas. You got Diesel Gordon out of Texas last year. He's he's probably a ways to go in terms of they might want to get him a little bit bigger. He's kind of on the slender side, but that's certainly not bad, right? He's more of a ball hawking safety, almost kind of in that Vince Nunley role, right? Where Vince was able to make a lot of plays and a lot of secondary reads and things like that. So it's a good sign for Washington that they're getting up 3 days before signing day.
No, I agree. And so actually when I looked at his film, I looked at him a little bit more in the Asa Turner mold of what he could be. He's not necessarily the athlete that Asa was coming out of Carlsbad, but in that same mold of a big ball hawking kind of safety who you put that extra weight on him and you can ask him to play a little bit more in run support, but you can really ask him to be just a traditional over the top free safety in a cover 1, cover 3 kind of look. And I think that he could do a whole lot for the program. And you're right, when you talk about Nunley and his exodus, it all just kind of seemed to line up. And because it kind of felt this way after his second just absence from the team for personal non-injury related reasons, as Kalen DeBoer called it, that this was somewhat inevitable. Just Nunley entering the portal. I know that's something that we already talked about. So I wanted to make sure that we could spend a little bit more time just on the defensive recruiting side of things with this. And so getting Mencke up for an official visit not only adds another member to what has been a relatively small secondary class, but it also just shows that Washington has recruited really well in the secondary under Kalen DeBoer's tenure, where we didn't necessarily see them get a lot of time to do that in the first year in 2022. But then in 2023, we saw Caleb Presley, Leroy Bryant, Curly Reed, Vincent Holmes, and Diesel Gordon. That's a really, really good class. 3 of those guys were rated as 4 stars coming in. Leroy Bryant arguably should have been one as well, just in terms of his production in high school. He was just really, really exciting to watch. So being able to close on a guy like Mencke and giving this class, Peyton Waters is a really talented. I think he'll play safety or nickel probably at the next level. I think that this move might turn him into a corner, but I wouldn't necessarily complain about that. I really like it. Just the way he's able to mirror and match from his time playing receiver at Birmingham. Shout out for Birmingham for that's where I played high school baseball. Got to get that in there. But then you look at Elias Johnson, who has just got all world potential and upside from what he's done. And then Josh Lair, who I think is a future Husky defender, just in terms of what he's able to do. He's really good just coming downhill and run support. And then I think he's really good in man coverage as well. So this would kind of round out that group and give Chuck Morrell, Juice Brown, just like a good group of guys to develop over the coming years, where you don't necessarily have to worry about getting a Jabbar Muhammad level transfer at safety, where you can say, all right, we might be pretty young here next year, but we're really excited about all this potential, all this upside. And instead of having to worry about plugging a hole and maybe not being able to take somebody like Paul Mencke, we can just instead just develop these guys and just see how this plays out.
Right. Well, and the thing you have to remember is at safety, both Cam Fab and Asa Turner can come back next season.
Right. That's
so that is the way to offset the portal. If you don't need to go get a guy in the portal, you just need both those guys to be healthy. Like that's, yeah. And I think of the two, you're probably rolling with Cam Fab a little safer, and then knowing that Asa can still provide the veteran presence, and if he can stay healthy, that's just a bonus, right? Kind of, that sort of thing. You can still go get somebody in the portal if you want to, probably after spring ball. But I think certainly, with Asa's injuries, they've been debilitating, but not for like a long-term thing, right? Like, especially with the way that the position he plays, having a hand injury, it's like, okay, well, you're still trying to make reads and make tackles. I mean, he played with 2 clubs at one point this season. So it's not like, oh, he's got a knee injury, he's got a back injury, he's got a concussion, because when you have a multitude of different injuries like that, then you kind of say, hey, we can't rely on you as much, right? We can't bank on that as much. Next year, Asa Turner could just have a resurgent year, and you don't even need to worry about the portal. And then that also helps for that room to continue to coach those guys up.
I agree. So I want to rewind just a little bit in terms of just the conversation we were having, because you mentioned something a little bit earlier saying they haven't really thrown out offers to any safeties in the portal, which seems to be very telling that if Asa Turner is able to utilize a medical redshirt for next season, he will. And I feel that we've kind of seen that the offers have been very telling of where guys might be leaning. Where the one position, and I know we're going to talk about it in the next segment, is offensive tackle, where that one is still a little bit questionable in terms of Roger Rosengarten's decision. But when we talk about wide receiver, and we've seen some offers go out receiver, we still know, like we talked about on yesterday's show, the Aaron Butler potential of him coming up here, where we know just reading the tea leaves seems to state, all right, they're going to be losing all 3 receivers. Where when you read the tea leaves at safety, you can kind of see, okay, it looks like Asa Turner and Cam Fab are going to be back next season. And then you can worry about, you still have McElveen in the mix. And then maybe you pepper in a Vincent Holmes or a Diesel Gordon or whoever. And you can still, and maybe even Mish Powell play a little bit more. Or no, is he out of eligibility this season? I think
I thought Mish had one more year, but yeah, either way.
Yeah, either way, that's one more to consider. Where he's lined up a little bit at safety in the past, and that's something that he could do, and you can still just try to find ways to utilize these young guys. And I know we're leaving Tristan Dunn out of this whole conversation, but I still think he'd be a great Husky, where he's just an absolute mismatch in there for any receiver lined up across from him. All right, Lars, we are going to move on to the offensive side of the ball here on Locked On Huskies, but I think that there's really interesting conversation to be had, especially at offensive line. But before we can get into that, we're going to send a shout out to our good friends over at FanDuel, because as the weather gets colder, the NFL offers stay hot on FanDuel. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 moneyline bet. That's $150 if your team wins. If you've been thinking about joining FanDuel, there's no better time to get in on the action. The app is so easy to use. There's a wide range of betting options, including spreads, player props, over-unders, and more. So visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and kick off the NFL season. FanDuel is an official partner of the NFL. Just a reminder to everybody, Washington still 4.5-point underdogs for the Sugar Bowl on FanDuel, and just keep it right here on Locked On Huskies, because as we get closer to the game, Lars and I are going to cook up some pretty fun same game parlays with our friends over at FanDuel. So it's going to be a lot of fun. All right, let's move on to the offensive side of the ball. But actually, before we get there, you were double checking Mish's eligibility. It looked like does he have one more year?
He does. So he has the COVID. He has the COVID year.
Thought so. Yeah. All right. So offensive. Let's start at offensive tackle, because we can talk about Roger Rosengarten and how he could come back for one more year. Troy Fautanu has announced that he will be going to the Senior Bowl in Mobile, Alabama after Washington's bowl season is over. So he's gone, and that's one that we all just kind of predicted that he'd be off to the NFL. But Roger Rosengarten still can come back if he wants to and play left tackle. But with the San Diego State offensive lineman, whose name is escaping me off the top of my head, I can't remember how to pronounce his last name, so I know Lars is going to have a lot of fun with this one. But he's going to be coming up for an official visit at some point this week. And I think that that's one thing where even if Roger does stay, getting another experienced offensive lineman in the room, especially at tackle, is going to be really, really important for this offense.
No doubt. Yeah. And I think that's kind of one of the, I mean, we saw how much run Jalin Clem got this season. So it's a matter of, okay, they're willing to play guys, but when you look at the depth, there's a lot of uncertainty, shall we say, next season, right? Because you got Parker Braithwaite and you have a lot of young talent, but you haven't necessarily seen that young talent come to fruition on the field. Garen Hatchett had some opportunities this season and didn't necessarily solidify himself, right? I mean, he didn't look. Drew Aspardi, is that who we're thinking of here from San Diego State?
I just could not.
Yeah, so for the pronunciation guide is Azzopardi. So yeah, that's how we pronounce that one. Yeah. But with that being said, I mean, Jalin Clem being, he'll probably get some more run next season, but I think in an ideal world, you want Roger Rosengarten back so they can compete for that spot, and then you can move Jalin Clem to right tackle. Or right. I mean, Jalin Clem has played a number of positions along the offensive line. His father's a OG coach, so it's one of those, he can play the offensive line just 1 through 5, right? That's similar to Parker Braithwaite, right? Where you can kick him in at center or guard, right? There's multitudes of positions where these guys can play. But Roger, we know, is a lockdown offensive tackle. So if you take both Troy and Roger out of that equation, that offensive line looks a lot different, because then we're talking, then you kick out Julius Buelo. There's a number of bodies that they have on the line, right? And a lot of bodies that we haven't seen from even the 2023 class. But I'm not necessarily sure. I mean, because I think right now your starting offensive line would be, if Roger doesn't come back, would be what? Jalin Clem, guard Membelar / Nate Kalepo, Parker Brailsford / Landon Hatchett / Mateo Melee if he comes. But yeah, there's so many things that are and for as I'm reading this line, this is not a slight to these kids, but if your right tackle is Sam Peacock and your right or your right tackle is Julius Buelo, right? If you kick him out to right tackle and you put somebody else at guard, there's just so many other moving parts to that where you're like, ooh, let's get another body. Let's get some veteran bodies in here and see if we can't sort this out a little cleaner.
You're absolutely right. And I think the way that you're trying to phrase it, because you're right, is there's just not a lot of experience, especially at tackle. And for whoever it is playing quarterback, like I know we want to spend a minute here on Will Rogers, whether it's Will Rogers, whether it's Austin Mack, Dylan Morris, Will Haskell, whoever it might be.
Cam Ward.
As he probably is going to commit to Miami. Just gotta throw that one out there. Just, if it happens by Tuesday morning, hey, we're right. But whoever that might be, getting an extra veteran body in that room to help shore up the tackle spot is going to be really helpful. And just making sure that you have more experience along the offensive line, because Julius Buelow has been good enough at guard this season, but playing tackle is going to be a whole different challenge for him. And obviously that there's a lot of time between now and the start of the 2024 season, but you want to make sure that it's shored up by then. And so let's have the Will Rogers conversation now. Then the Mississippi State quarterback who seems to be a heavy favorite to transfer to Washington, which I still think that's a good fit just in terms of the offense. But the question would be, I think the biggest question would be, who's he going to throw to outside of Jeremy Bernard, Denzel Boston, some of these freshmen?
Giles Jackson.
Giles Jackson, yeah.
Right. But yeah, no, but that's a fair point, right? Because you're replacing so much talent at the receiver position, but then you have Rashid Williams, Tayshawn Lyons, Keith Reynolds coming in from what will be the redshirt freshman class this past year. And then you have Justice Williams and Jason Robinson coming in, but I don't think you want to roll with that young of a core. I mean, it's been no disrespect to Denzel, but I mean, man, if that starting trio is Denzel, Giles Jackson, and Jeremy Bernard, that looks a lot different than Jalen Pope, Jalen Miller, and Roma Dunze. And now we have said, right, this offense is going to look different, right? But I think when you set such a high standard for this room, you can't tell me that Jamarcus Shepard's going to look at that room and think, yeah, we can roll with this. We're good.
So this is something that I was just thinking about the other day. I was having a conversation about somebody who was talking about Giles Jackson's eligibility versus getting Aaron Butler. And do you think that one of the reasons the coaches wanted to make sure that Giles could come back was so that there would be just a fifth, sixth year senior in this room along with the rest of these guys? Because that feels like, and unless you can go out and get a Tobias Merriweather in the portal, one of these other guys who's still young, somewhat inexperienced for the most part, unless you're getting Chris Hummel, the Tulane kid. And even if you are, that kind of takes away from what you'd be getting in an Aaron Butler if you're able to close the deal with him and what that would look like with a couple of years of development from Jamarcus Shepard. Where getting Giles would just kind of negate some of that. Please. No, I'm sorry.
Right. Yeah, no doubt. Well, yeah, to your point, it's not only that Giles is the 5th year, 6th year senior, but he's also been in the program, right? It's not like you're bringing in a veteran transfer. Hey, we have some young guys. We need somebody to kind of mentor these guys, so we're going to bring Jabbar Muhammad. It's like, no, let's have that guy on the roster, and if we need to supplement with a transfer, so be it. But and especially the way Giles' career is gone, you would think like he knows how to handle adversity. He's a good guy for the guys in the room to be like, hey, you're not playing. I didn't play for a year and a half at Michigan. Like I did, but I didn't get as much run as I probably should have and things like that. So he's a good older veteran guy to have in there who also can contribute at a number of positions on the field, right? So it was a win-win. The more you start to look at, why bring Giles back? Like, why not try and get Polk back? Or why not try and get McMillan back? It's like, well, those guys are in a different boat, right? They're just in a different boat. That ship is on a different trajectory, whereas Giles could still make something of his career, no doubt. And to do that, he's going to need a lot of targets next season, which he'll get. But being that old guy in the room, I think, is one of the undervalued things in college football, where, I mean, look at a number of positions on this team. Like if you don't have Jabbar Muhammad and you don't have Mish Powell, that secondary looks a lot different. That
Tuli defensive tackle would be another good one.
Exactly, right. And Eddie at linebacker, same thing, right? Where yes, you have Alfonso, but Eddie's like the heartbeat of the room and the 6-year veteran. So it's having that true experience and seeing the highs and the lows of college football that maybe they don't always carry out on Saturdays, but have an absolute impact Monday through Sunday.
Right. And it's going to be interesting to see how the rest of this offensive class shapes out through the portal, because it's the same thing that we just had the conversation with on the defensive side, where the offers seem to indicate the interest, where we've seen some people in the YouTube comments saying, well, why aren't they pushing harder for some of these other quarterbacks? Like, why is it just Will Rogers? And it says, to me, that seems to signal, because it was Cam Ward or Will Rogers seem to be the only guys that they showed a lot of interest in securing. But I think when we look at it, they're saying, all right, we're pretty happy with where we are at quarterback. If we can upgrade with one of these two guys, great. If not, we're fine rolling with who we have in the room, whether it be a Will Haskell, probably Austin Mack or Dylan Morris or whoever else. And I think that same thing can kind of be said at wide receiver, where they're happy with the talent they have there. If they can upgrade here or there, great. If not, they're not going to go to extreme lengths to make sure they can get a Jeremy Bernard level transfer, even though that's just a whole different case of when he did decide to come back.
Oh, no doubt. Yeah, that was a special circumstance. And that is different than the Tobias situation, where Tobias did not commit to Washington out of high school, did not show it. I mean, was interested, but I think with the combination of staff, overlap, all that stuff, it was a different situation. But I think to that point, it would be not a weird fit, not a bad fit, but I would still be a little surprised if Tobias ended up at Washington. Still could, but I would hedge my bet against that at this point.
I'm with you there. Lars, as always, thank you so much for being here with us. Thank you to all the everydayers tuning in. We really do appreciate your support. It means the world to us. Make sure you tune into the Wednesday show, when we are going to be joined by the one and only On Montlake's Christian Capel will be with us. But until then, and make sure you don't miss it by making sure you subscribe wherever you get your podcast, whether that's YouTube, Spotify, Apple Music, Amazon Music. We are there. We are everywhere. We are updating this channel every single day with new content. So make sure you leave us a 5-star review, like the video, leave us a comment down below. Make sure you follow us on all social media platforms. And again, make sure you hit that subscribe button so you don't miss out. Thank you so much for tuning in, and we will talk to you on Wednesday.